OfficiallyPTS.
Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome. This is my very special guest, Janis Gilham-Grady. How are you doing?
I am doing good.
I love it. I love it. Oh, thank you so much.
Takes me back a few years.
I bet. Well,
and
I didn't even realize how perfect.
This was from the original Freewinds Maiden Voyage.
Wow. Well, that's perfectly apt, I would suppose, because we're here to talk about Maiden Voyage. Today is the Maiden Voyage event, which is a big event in the calendar of Scientology, right? There's the International Association of Scientologists event in October, and there's the LRH birthday, and the next event is today, 6th of June, Maiden Voyage, which celebrates the setting sail of the Freewinds. And you were there on the ship during the first
Maiden
Voyage, weren't you?
Yes.
Wow.
And my husband ran the missions that found the Freewinds.
Wow.
And ran all the missions that set it up for the Maiden Voyage.
That's incredible. Well, I can't wait to hear more of these stories, and that's what we're here for. Let's just say hello to some of the people in the chat first. Suppressive Squirrel is here, waiting for the comments about Cooper. That was so funny on your channel.
It was funny.
Mark the Dorset SP. Evening, Alex. Looking forward to this one. Mark is in the house. It's Mark here supporting Janis and Alex. Thank you for coming. We've got Mary Kay. Hi, everyone from a very hot New Mexico. Well, I hear it's hot in Vegas. I mean, it was hot in Vegas when I was there, but it's pretty hot there now, right?
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be 115 or something ridiculous today. But, we have air conditioning and swimming pools.
Yeah. And your pool is fantastic. I went for a swim when I visited the other week.
Yes.
It's lovely.
Yes, you did.
Lovely. But here, let me show you this. So for those of you who don't know, the Freewinds is the cruise ship that Scientology have that is sailing around the Caribbean. And it's the only place in the world where you can get, or you can do the OT8 level, which is the highest level, the top of the bridge. And the whole point is that it's a distraction-free environment out in the seas. And, it's the only place you can do this. And every year, David Miscavige holds an event on board the Freewinds. This is a picture from one a few years ago to celebrate the Maiden Voyage anniversary. And it's just like any other Scientology event where he talks about the humanitarian efforts and the expansion and all of this. It's much the same. The Freewinds are very much used as a PR activity. Dave Miscavige is seen here receiving an award from the Colombian police. There's letters from, Barbados government and the Aruba Port Authority, Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. There's awards just kind of championing how fantastic the Freewinds is in all of these Caribbean islands and how it's making a change to the area. Was that what it was like, Janis, when the Freewinds set sail? Was the whole purpose to, build relations with these governments, or has it changed since 1988?
It's always, even on the Apollo, the Royal Scotsman and the Freewinds, it's always been a purpose there of having the port captain's office build public relations and make it a safe port so that we're always welcomed. And they're just continuing that activity of being accepted in the community and becoming a part of the community. And interestingly enough, I actually got a phone call last week about a couple of years ago. Some girl disappeared off a cruise line, and the family ended up in Curacao. And I got a call last week asking, why would Ludwig Alpers, who was the port captain of the Freewinds, be involved in contacting that family and asking the family questions about the missing girl? Well, the only reason anyone on the Freewinds would be involved is that would be part of their public relations and being a part of the community and seeing what they can do to help and be, part of the community.
Yeah, I bet. And What was it like? So the Freewinds isn't the first ship that Scientology had, right? Because there was the flagship Apollo, and there's a whole history of Scientology and the high seas. And you have the
Right.
experience of working directly with L. Ron Hubbard, and then Dave Miscavige, I suppose, on the Freewinds. So you have seen both sides of what it was like then and what it was like on the Freewinds. What can you talk us through, like, firstly, how the Freewinds came about? Because the Apollo was decommissioned, and there was a period of time when there was no Scientology ship, right?
Right.
Can you talk us through that and how it all came about?
Yeah, my understanding of how the Freewinds came about was, one, they were setting up the IAS, the International Association of Scientologists. It had already been decided OT8 was going to be released, and it would be released through the Flag Service Org, the FSO in Clearwater. However, with the IAS being formed and wanting to keep it offshore and away from the IRS, how would you do that? You would set up a ship. So a ship was needed in order to be the base for the IAS. And then the cover story was deliver OT8.
Wow.
And so my husband actually was given the orders, you need to find a ship. So he fired out various different missions and until they found this one. And then he had to fire a mission to find a captain for it, a Scientologist who was a captain, a trained licensed captain. And they found Mike Napier up in Seattle, and he was a Scientologist. So they recruited him and got his whole family. He had like 3 or 4 kids and a wife, and the kids were set up in a nursery in Curacao, and the wife was there. And then, so Captain Napier was put on the ship, and then it had to be renovated. And my husband ran all these various missions to get that all done.
Wow. What a task. And especially the fact that it wasn't to do with servicing or helping people or anything like that. It is just a front or a way of having some of their money offshore, right?
Yeah, well, then it was decided, let's put OT8 on the ship so that there was some public and a reason for it. But there wasn't enough OT8 delivery to support the ship. So then they come up with, okay, how are we going to get income for the ship service org? So then they come up with these short little courses people can do while they're between sessions, or if they're not there for OT8, they can go and do these little courses.
Yeah,
Courses.
That's what I always found so fascinating, because you can look up online service completions in different orgs, and there's one where you can see the services that people have completed on board the Freewinds. And I find it fascinating. When I was, before I knew this, I was looking people up that I know from London org, and they were like, Freewinds, they did the Way to Happiness book course, or the Dianetics seminar, or whatever, like these basic book and introductory courses. And I'm like, why have they gone all the way to the Freewinds to do something that they could do in their local org? It seems completely ridiculous, but I suppose that's why, because they need people who are on board once they've done OTA or beforehand to keep them doing stuff and to make money for the ship, right?
Yeah, or family members, or even just Scientologists who they can reg and have come vacation on the Freewinds, And then they started having Sea Org members come and do their sea basics there. And then I heard they even had public paying to go and learn how to scrub a deck.
Yeah, and that's still going on today, right? I've seen adverts in Scientology groups on social media that are saying, send your kids to the Freewinds, or come to the Freewinds yourself and learn how to, handle MEST, matter, energy, space, and time, and do these physical courses. That's not just spiritual.
No, and that all came about as a solution to the lack of income that the Freewinds had, because OT8 wasn't enough public coming in. And even when I was there, I was at the Freewinds twice. Once to do the Maiden Voyage and get the ship set up and pull off the original Maiden Voyage. That was my first mission. And then the second time I went back there in 1990, Milt Wolf, who was the commanding officer of the ship, yep, that's me. Milt Wolf had gotten in trouble for gambling and drinking ashore. So I was sent out to the ship to be the commanding officer while Milt got a cleanup. And while I was there, I had the same problem. We got to keep making income. What is blocking us making income? Well, if we have to depend on the flag service org in Clearwater to get the OT7s through all the clearances and their setups, then that becomes a block to getting people to the ship for OT8. And that's where I said, you need to change it and make the ship responsible. So as soon as someone finishes OT7, they go to the ship and the ship does all their setups and everything for OT8. Then they're in control of their own public. But that didn't happen. My husband ended up in trouble, and then they tried to contain me, and that was the start of my beginning of leaving.
Wow, gosh, it all started on the Freewinds. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow. And so this is, for example, this is the Freewinds, which is the ship they're using today. And then this is, let me find it. This is the flagship Apollo, which is the ship that came before it. What are is it comparing the two? Is the Freewinds bigger? Is it smaller? I mean, Freewinds has been renovated. It's a lovely looking place in the pictures and stuff, but how would you compare the two ships?
Well, this one was a rust bucket. I mean, you can see all the rust on it. Yeah. And we did then paint it white. We spent a lot of time. We went out to sea anchor and just did renovations, chipping and painting to get her white and get all the rust off of her and turn her into, that's a good looking ship there. But she was only like 360 feet long, which is very small. We only had 2 decks of passengers. We had, A deck and B deck, and we had tween decks, which was all officers, or originally it used to be cattle, because it was a cattle ship going between Ireland and England with some passengers. The passengers were like a second thought. The main business was cattle.
Wow.
And so then you go to the Freewinds, which was a major, major upgrade. Because she was built as a passenger ship. There was no cattle on there. There was no manure on there, so it was taking something that, yes, it was old, but it all got beautified with the renovations. And I'm surprised. So I did that mission, the original Maiden Voyage, in 1988. And so here we are 46 years later.
36.
36, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's still
36 years later.
going.
Still going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say? Go on.
No, and they did do major renovations. They did it when we first got her, and then again later they did more upgrades of her. I haven't been there since 1990, so I don't know what they've done in the last 34 years.
And what was it like on board when you compare the two ships? Because obviously the Apollo was L. Ron Hubbard, he was running the ship and he was supposedly doing research and all this sort of stuff. And it was very much the international, headquarters of Scientology for a while. Whereas the Freewinds has never been that. It's like you say, it was just a front for the IES and to deliver services. What was it like on board? How was it different on the two ships?
Well, being on the Apollo under Hubbard, that was stressful as a Commodore's messenger. We had responsibilities and ran messages and had to deal with Hubbard and his temper. So there was a lot more stress on the Apollo. But, I also grew up on it as a teenager. So we had our fun times. We had our times where we would, run ashore without permission. And, we were regular teenagers, or instead of going to school, we'd go sit in a lifeboat and all just smoke, or, we did crazy things like that. But if you compare it to the Freewinds, when I was on the Freewinds, I was in control. So yeah, I had the stress of having to pull things off, but I didn't have someone over me right there demanding things get done right now. And I found when I did that, my first mission on the Freewinds for the renovations, not once did I have to yell at anybody or anything. It was like the crew were magnificent. I would just make a comment to the captain, and the next thing I know, it's handled. Even my mattress. One day the captain said, "How'd you sleep?" I said, "Oh, those mattresses are a little hard. Next thing I know, I go to my cabin and there they are changing out the mattress.
Wow. And do you think that's because you were the commanding officer, so you kind of got special privileges, or do you think it's just because LRH wasn't there and it was a nicer environment?
Well, I did get special privileges, but it was a nice environment. And the crew were very dedicated crew. And they wanted to just pull off that maiden voyage and make everybody happy. It was like a purpose, everyone pulling together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some questions in the comments which I'm starring and I'll bring them up in a second. I just want to firstly bring this picture up here because this is you on the Apollo, right? As a Commodore messenger?
That's actually my sister.
Okay.
And I put that in there to show that as messengers, we sat at the end of the A-deck corridor where Hubbard's cabin was, and we sat there so that if he wanted us, he just had to press a buzzer and a light went off and a buzz sound, and we would run down to his cabin. Or if he went in session, you can see under the chair there, we would put up a sign saying, "Quiet, LRH research."
Wow. And what do you suspect? Do you suspect he was actually researching, or do you think he was just, wanting some peace?
Oh, no. He was researching. We would set up in his auditing room right next to his cabin. He had a table. We'd set up the e-meter, and he had his papers. And after every session, there'd be his sessions that he'd put in a folder and put away in his auditing room. And he actually did audit every day. Pretty much, he went into session.
Yeah, and this is a picture of him presumably in his office on the Apollo, right?
Yes, that is in his office on the Apollo, and I put this in the collection, though that's Hannah Eltringham on the right, and on the left it's Jill Karlstrom, who was the staff captain at the time, and Hannah was probably Commodore Staff 1 for HCO, or she was the AVC authorizations and verification officer at that time. But I put that there because when we'd come back from a message or when he'd call us in, we would go stand where they're sitting and he would talk to us or give us our message, or we would reply in that position.
I think just one thing to note as well, how different things were back then to how they are now, is the sheer quantity of photos you've got from the ship. There's pictures of the interior here, the pictures I've shown already, and more to come. But like nowadays, you wouldn't be allowed to take pictures on the Freewinds. I'm sure your phone would be taken away from you the moment you board because they don't want people leaking stuff from the ship.
Yeah, well, the problem actually, you think there's a lot of pictures, but on the Apollo, no one really had cameras. No one took photographs, and there's just a few here and there. And somehow mine were withheld and taken when I blew. I couldn't get them back. So these are actually photos that I collected afterwards.
Wow.
And the photo you just showed of those two chairs, that's where we as messengers would sit. That's wow. LRH's office in there, and we'd sit in those chairs and he'd yell out, "Messenger," and we'd jump up and run in front of that desk and say, "Yes, sir." And then he would give us our message and we'd go, "Yes, sir." And we'd go running out and go wherever we had to go.
And what sort of messages or tasks were you sent to do? Like, I imagine it's anything and everything, but did you get asked to do any silly things or stupid things or little things, or was it always something really big and important? Like what tasks?
It was not silly or useless in the view of this is what we're doing, So he didn't just send us off to do something stupid. He'd send us off on a message run. If we're rocking and rolling in a storm, we would be running messages up to the bridge to find out what our course is, what's all going on. And, we'd go running back and forth, relaying the information. If he's in his cabin and the engine isn't running properly and he's hearing like a knocking sound, we would be running off to the engine room to find out what's causing the knocking. Or if there's hot air coming out of the vents instead of cool air, we'd have to go to the engine room and get that fixed. Or if it's management things, we would run stat books back and forth on the orgs, or we would run messages to the West United States Programs Operations Chief and ask them questions about the organizations that they were running programs for. And then we'd run back and we would give the answer. So it varied with management and ship things that as a young teenager, because I started at 12, I got oriented pretty fast learning ship terminology and management stuff. And that's how I learned the world map, was where were all the orgs in the world. Because in our CIC, we'd have a map with pins in every location of an org. And I'd stand there, while Hubbard's talking or something, I'd look at the map, and I learned geography from that.
And was LRH, obviously he's the Commodore, but was he, I'm presuming he wasn't the captain of the ship all the time. There was someone else driving the vessel, right? He was there researching and doing his own thing, right? He wasn't at the helm of the ship the whole time, no?
No, there were times that he was, but normally, like when I arrived on board, Leon Steinberg was the ship's captain. And then later on, Jovan Staden, Ron Pook, Captain Bill Robertson, Amos Jessup was a deputy at one point. Mike Douglas was a deputy. Then Norman Starkey. And these were the different captains we went through. And there was a period where someone might get removed as captain, and so Hubbard was the captain. Or when we did the liability cruise in 1968, the ship was assigned liability because no one was trained. Mary Sue became captain. Wow. And though she didn't know a lot about the sea, she had key people under her that supported her on the knowledge.
Yeah, that's Mary Sue there, right?
That's Mary Sue there. That was actually taken in Marseille when Hubbard was moving from, he'd been on the Avon River, and that was called Flag because that was where the Commodore was. And then he'd moved ashore in Marseille and was staying at a villa. And we got through the liability cruise and had a trained crew by that point, and we sailed into Marseille, and he came aboard. And from left to right, that's Craig Lipschutz. He was an officer, and then Hubbard and Mary Sue and Leon Steinberg and Irene Derman.
Wow. And this is the first time I've seen people in uniform, because looking through these pictures, it's very clear that there wasn't really a bit, the Sea Org uniform that we're all used to now. This is you with LRH. And, there's no paramilitary, paranaval kind of dress code back then on the Apollo, but there very much is now. And right. Certainly on the Freewinds. Do you remember how that came about, or why and where that whole uniform push?
Yeah, on the Apollo, no one really, the financial planning never really would put money aside for uniforms. So people pretty much, you'd go ashore and you're in an Arab country and clothing was so cheap. You'd go into the Casbah and you'd buy a pair of jeans and you'd look for a blue shirt, and then okay, this will work, and a pair of sneakers. And that's what most of the crew did. And then there were times where we got dress uniforms, and then they had a closet full of dress uniforms for missionaries to wear. So if they went out to another Sea Org or a Class 4 org on mission, they could go and see the uniform IC and get fitted for a uniform to wear on the mission. But otherwise, it was pretty much like I wore my messenger outfit when I was on watch, and that's when people would know I'm on watch. Don't stop me or talk to me about something unless it has to do with the message I'm running on. And then when I was off watch, I'd wear civilian clothes or something like that, so people would recognize the difference.
Sure. And that's still something today. Like I remember the first time I ever visited St. Hill, which is obviously not a ship, it's a land base, but it's still run in a similar way. And I remember sitting there in the cafeteria and seeing this guy running down the steps in full, naval looking attire, the full SEAL uniform, literally running. And I said to my friend who I was there with, is like, why is he running? And he said, oh, because he's a Commodore's messenger. He's on an important mission and it needs to be done now and there's no delay. So he has to run everywhere. And I, as a teenager, was like, wow, that's so cool. I want to be that guy, like doing something that's so important. You have to run and you get to wear the uniform. I was like, that's so cool, man. But obviously there's a darker side to it. I didn't know.
As an actual original messenger, if I saw that happening in a land base and they're running because they're a Commodore's messenger, I'd like, how ridiculous is that? I mean, yeah, when we're on watch and Hubbard gave us a message, we ran out. We'd take those stairs 3 to 4 steps at a time, and go as fast as we could, But when you're in management and you're running programs, which is what the messengers ended up doing, there's no reason to be running unless there's a damn emergency. Otherwise, it's ridiculous.
That's true. There's a great question here from Michelle Veldman. Why did the messengers have to do this kind of running around? Couldn't LRH interface with people? Great question.
Yeah, very good question. Well, what happened is when he was on the Avon River, if he needed anyone, he just went down below decks and talked to them because it was such a small ship. When he moved over to the Apollo, it's 360 feet. And his office is at the very top, and we've got 4 to 5 decks, and you could be from 100 to 400 people. So messenger, the very first night he came aboard and wanted someone, was like, I need a messenger to run off and find him. And that way he could be working on writing a policy letter or talking to someone, while the messenger went off and got someone or took a dispatch to someone and got him some answers for the conversation he's having.
Mark is saying here, very good point. There were no phones in those days on the ship, the 1960s. Messengers would run to deliver messages, right? That's the easiest way of getting communication going on the ship.
Correct. And when we first got the ship, it had a PA system, and that was pretty much it. Or you walk your walkie-talkie pretty much from the bridge to the forward to aft, but there was no intercom system. So Hubbard had an intercom system with about 12 stations put in the ship. So there was like one on the bridge, one in his office, one by the aides, one in the aft lounge, different places like that. So anyone on the ship, if they're looking for someone, could do an announcement that hit all the intercom boxes or just a particular one, because the crew hung out in the aft lounge. You're looking for someone, you make an announcement over that intercom looking for that person, and someone might come back and say, oh no, they're not here, I did see them forward. And so then you can intercom forward and try and find someone, because it was much larger. And it was a lot of running that we did to find people, because people move around.
Yeah, I bet. Let's talk a little bit about the Freewinds itself here, because this is mostly the Apollo that we're talking about there, and we talked about the difference. But this is a picture of you on the Freewinds, and this 1988 during the Maiden Voyage, was this? Or
yeah, this was at the very end of the Maiden Voyage. I'd been on the Freewinds probably about 3 months to pull off the renovations and get it ready for Maiden Voyage and pull off the Maiden Voyage. And then after all the passengers had left that were there for the Maiden Voyage and things had settled down, my mission was now done. So this was the night before I left, with Captain Napier standing there, the tall one, and Milt Wolfe to his right. And you can actually see on the right side between myself and Jenny Linson is Scott Campbell. Everyone, I did a couple of interviews with Scott and Carrie Campbell on my channel, Peeling the Onion, of Scott, probably 5 interviews of Scott and Carrie on their days on the Freewinds when I was there with them and so forth, and later on they're leaving. But anyway, this here, we had these beautiful plaques done up for the Maiden Voyage, and the captain had all the crew sign this for me. So that they'd given me this plaque that was signed by all the crew, thanking me for my mission. And when I left, I had a storage unit in Hammett, and Jackson can tell the story of how they went and they took pliers and they cut the lock on my storage unit. They took my photo album of the Maiden Voyage, and they took my plaque with all the crew signatures on it.
No,
Yeah.
that's incredible. And you didn't
Yep.
know about it until afterwards, obviously.
No, well, I'd blown. And so a few weeks later, I come back and Paul and I go to the storage unit. And I was like, wait a minute, why isn't my key work on this lock? I went to the front, and that's when I found out that they'd come in and cut the locks, because I'd given one person permission to go into that storage unit in case I needed something while I was on the Freewinds.
Mm.
And when I came back, I never removed them from it. And so they had that person go to the front desk and get the lock cutter, and broke in and took all my photos with LRH, more my birthday cards from LRH, because I worked with LRH on the ship, or actually 11 years. I was with him pretty much 6 hours a day. So they took all my birthday cards, any letters I had from LRH and Mary Sue, and my photographs.
Wow. And did you ask for them back?
Well, yeah, I did. And we met with Mike Sutter. We'd loaded up everything, and we met with Mike Sutter to get my motorbike and those things. And we were told, when you get back in good standing, we'll give you those things. Well, I've never gotten back in good standing. And according to Jackson, they left my photos out in the rain, and then they all got destroyed.
Wow, gosh, that's horrible.
Yeah. And the birthday cards, I don't know. They might have those stored away somewhere, because those are valuable.
Yeah, anything that's written by L. Ron Hubbard will be in storage somewhere, because they see that as sacrosanct, right? That's incredible.
Yeah. And so, they're personally signed birthday cards.
Yeah. So what was the Freewinds like on that maiden voyage? Obviously, you bought the passenger ship, you're renovating it, and then where did you go on the maiden voyage? Like, what was the purpose of the maiden voyage? Where did you go? What was it like on board?
Well, the maiden voyage, we'd done a shakedown cruise beforehand just to get out there and make sure we weren't going to have engine trouble and so forth. And then all the passengers come aboard, and then it was just kind of run the ship, and any mistakes, keep it behind the scenes so no one sees it. And the night, just a couple of days before, we even had a bursted pipe, and it's like, oh my God. But, the crew just jumped onto it and fixed that bursted pipe, and it just went smooth.
Wow. And who was on board? Who were the public on that first maiden voyage? Was it kind of VIP special top Scientologists that just wanted to say?
Yeah, there were a lot of Scientologists who had made donations to the Freewinds for the renovations and so forth, and they all got their names put on different cabin doors. And so those people would come aboard and get to stay in their cabin with their name on it. And, and then there was also the original people who were to go on to the Class 8 course.
And so every year now there's the Maiden Voyage celebration event. So I'm sure if it's not being recorded today, it will be this weekend or sometime soon. And then it's going to be broadcast to orgs around the world, where David Miscavige is giving a talk about all the wonderful work that the Freewinds and Scientology are doing in the Caribbean and all of this stuff. Did that anniversary event happen straight away after the year after it was launched, or did that come later?
No, the very next year they did their first anniversary maiden voyage, and then the second year, and they've been doing it ever since.
And was it a similar sort of event?
It's just a money maker. I mean, Hubbard does not encourage events. He actually was against doing events. And but Miscavige finds, I guess it helps his ego by going to these events and being the only one there, when originally all the executives were supposed to kind of be recognized, and it was supposed to be the executive director international who was supposed to be who everyone sees, not watchdog committee, not not RTC or anything like that. That was all supposed to be behind the scenes. Executive director international is supposed to be the top dog.
Wow.
And now no one knows who he is or where he is.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much secrecy, and if you look at these events, mostly on stage it's just David Miscavige and Freedom Medal winners and stuff go up on stage, but it's very much the Captain Mickey Witz show rather than events in the past where different executives would come up on stage and talk at these events.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
And
And someone, there's a comment there. Yes, David Miscavige was on the original Maiden Voyage. I remember I'm standing there watching, we're pulling out of port in Curacao, and the ship kind of, maneuvered a little sharp. And Dave's like, oh, what's happening? Oh, is he going to hit the dock? And I'm like, no, Dave, it's okay. And Captain Napier, I'll tell you, he could parallel park that ship. He was so good.
wow.
But Dave, he'd never been on a ship before, so he didn't know what was happening, so I'm having to calm him down so that no one's bothering Napier as he's getting the ship out of dock.
And if this was 1988, so that would have been after Miscavige usurped control, because LRH died in 1986, right? So Miscavige at that point was COB, chairman of the board. He was the top dog, and he's there worried and scared about what's going on with the ship. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Did you tell him he's being re-stimulated?
No, I didn't tell him that.
There's a really good question here, actually, that I saw a second ago that was about close calls. Let me find it here. Yeah, one
Look
love
at
here.
Alex, I got a here.
Hi. There's a question here. So one love is asking, were there any close calls with the voyage, storms or mishaps?
With a voyage.
Yeah, I suppose with the Freewinds or the Apollo.
Well, not with the Freewinds while I was there, but with the Apollo, we definitely had some very close calls. And the reason why we had the liability cruise was there was a storm, and we actually backed and hit the rocks and put a dent in the back of the ship and bent the propellers. And there's times we lost our anchor, and we're sitting in a storm, we're dragging anchor, and we have to leave dock because it was so bad, the swells coming in. Oh, we definitely, we were in a hurricane. And I remember the person on the flying bridge was tied so that they wouldn't get washed off. We had waves going over the top of the ship. I ran a message to the engine room, and the only way to get from Hubbard's office to the engine room was pretty much going out on the top deck, on the prom deck, in through the engineer's quarters, and then down into the engine room. I had to hold on to the rail because the ship was rolling so much. I could look down, and if I'd let go, I would have slid right into the water.
Oh my gosh.
And then when I got into the engineer's quarters to go down the engine room, and then when I was coming back up, I went to push the door open to the promenade deck, and it wouldn't open because a wave had hit it. And the water swirling around that porthole. And this is on the promenade deck. And it was pretty hairy.
It sounds very unsafe, Janis.
Yeah, but amazingly, no one died. We had no major accidents. Wow. We did have a guy lose a couple of fingers in the early days, but and that was docking. But miraculously, we had no major issues.
Wow.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart.
What do you think? I've got one more question, and then we'll start looking at some of these questions that were being starred.
I'm sorry about the dogs.
It's okay. Someone also is saying cuteness overload. And QC here, absolutely. Cool. So what do you think the future of the Freewinds holds, having been on the Apollo and then starting on the Freewinds? And obviously you're not in Scientology anymore, but you know how these things work and how they run. The Freewinds is getting old. It's an old ship, and it's still got a bit of life in it, I'm sure. But what do you think will happen to it? Do you think it's going to be decommissioned and they'll buy a new ship, or are they going to keep it or get rid of it? What?
Alex, I haven't been there for 30 34 years, so I really don't have an answer to that. I can make something up, you know.
What do you suspect? Like, what with your knowledge and experience of when you were in Scientology and in the Sea Org, like with that knowledge, what can you imagine is the most likely sort of thing for it to happen?
As long as the IAS exists and they need to keep it offshore, then yes, they will have another ship if that Freewinds gets too old and they have to mothball it.
And did you know about this IAS thing when you were on the Maiden Voyage, when you're doing the mission, or was that something you found out later after leaving?
It was something I figured out myself. And you hear different things, but I was part of management. I was the deputy watchdog committee chairman, so you hear different things and you're told different things and you put things together. None of us were stupid.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, they won't tell when you're in Scientology, they don't tell you everything, but you can work stuff out. You just learn not to ask questions, right?
Right. Well, there's a need to know on different levels,
Yeah. All right. Well, look, I know you've got a date with your granddaughter to do some swimming, so let's go through some of these Q&As that I've starred.
Okay.
Denver Stevo says, greeting from Denver. How's it going, Denver? Stevo, thank you. Oh, and Michelle, greetings from Ottawa Valley, Ontario, Canada. And here, so One Love says, I love everything about Janis, but what I like most is her broad knowledge of the early history and the way she tells it with kindness. I have to jump in before you respond, Janis, and say I agree. One of my highlights of coming to visit you in Vegas the other week was us talking about the history and learning about all of these stories and what life was like back in the day, because there aren't many people that talk about that, especially not on YouTube. And the chance to meet you and see all of your books and your picture, library of pictures and stuff is just, it was incredible to hear about what life was like then versus now.
Well, thank you. I don't have regrets, and I try to look at things positively. There was abuses and I went through abuses and stuff, but you got to move on. You can't hold on to that stuff because then you never move on. And you got to keep creating and make a new life. And that's what I've done.
And do you think I'm going to plug your book here. Janis has a book, Commodore's Messenger. Do you think writing that, this is about your story of life on the ship and being in Scientology, was writing the book part of that process for you, the healing and learning about what happened to you? Was that quite cathartic? Definitely.
I'll tell you, writing those books was a roller coaster ride for me emotionally. And I don't I'm not an emotional person. Growing up in Scientology, you don't get sympathy by being emotional.
Yeah.
But writing the stuff and going through what I had to go through, having a disconnect from my mother at 9 years old, and then at 11 years old, having a disconnect from my father, and my mother being off in the Sea Org, and those were very emotional times for me, and writing about it became emotional. And then the fact that my mother and father are in the US for 5 years, while I'm living on a ship for 8, and I don't see them for 5 years. It gets me thinking back. And when I look at my children at 11, I'm like, what were my parents thinking? I could not do that. But as I'm typing this stuff, I got emotions going. And I think that's why I'm not pushing on my third book, because I think my third book is more emotional for me, because then I have to go through my mother's death and further family separation and that type of thing. So I'm enjoying doing the YouTube channel with Mark on peeling the onion, because I seem to avoid those subjects.
and absolutely, you're right to do that. It's it's traumatic and it's horrible stuff, and it's not something you want to willingly, to use the Scientology word, re-stimulate, right? Unless you have to. So absolutely. It's a good question here from Love It. Janis, first time I've heard anyone mention Elrond's temper. Did he have a bad temper?
Oh, yes. I hear redheads have tempers. Do you have a temper, Alex?
Well, You've spent time with me in Vegas. You tell me. I don't know.
No,
I don't think I do.
you didn't display any temper. But Hubbard, he definitely had a temper. And I remember as a kid at St. Hill when I was 10 years old, and we used to go to the Winter Garden right next to his office, and we would play cards or jacks with his kids. And I heard him yelling, and I kind of froze. I had never heard anyone yell like that before. So then when I ended up on the Royal Scotsman, I kind of knew what to expect. And there was a period I didn't want to be a messenger. I'd been a messenger, and then they got other messengers, and I was the Master at Arms assistant, which I was very happy to do. But then I was pulled in. I said, told the Commodore wants you back as a messenger. And I was like, I don't want to do it. And they're like, why not? And I said, he yells too much. And they're like, look, for your sake and my sake, you need to go and do it. So I did it. And the next 11 years, there I am doing it. But I would, when it was time to go on watch, I used to go up to the A deck, and the next level up was where we'd sit and, and we'd work for Hubbard. And when I get to A deck, I'd always tell myself, you can do this. You can get through this watch and not have him yell. And so I would work on my watch and I'd be very proud of myself if I got through 6 hours of him not yelling about something. Or if he did yell at it, me getting him to calm down about it. And that's what I would work towards.
Wow. I can only imagine it's a similar situation with Miscavige nowadays and the people in his inner circle, because we all know Miscavige has a temper and he's beaten his staff and all of this. And I can imagine it's similar. All the people around him are just doing what they can to try not to provoke any sort of physical response. It's such a horrible situation to be in.
Right. And so let me bring up the subject of Shelley. People are like, where's Shelley? Shelley probably is at Lake Arrowhead at the location there. But I'll tell you, she's probably happy to be there away from DM and his temper and his inconsistencies and, his cross orders of himself. And she's probably there with friends, and she's happy because she doesn't have to deal with his crap. And yeah, she's probably still married to him because, one, if you're divorced, she could take 50% of that bank account. And that's a heavy, heavy duty bank account that he's sitting on. Mm-hmm. And two, if they're married, no one can subpoena her and put her in a courtroom and find out where all the skeletons are buried. Exactly. So that's my view on what's happening with Shelley.
Yeah. And where she supposedly is up in the Twin Peaks CST base, it's like, I was there the other week. It's a beautiful part of the world. And yes, it's very remote and isolated, but there's trees, there's mountains. It's a lovely place to be. So, I would imagine that is far nicer than being at SMP or in the vicinity of Miscavige, right?
Exactly.
One love with another question here. Question for Janis. I know you enjoyed some time on the ships. So what is your favorite memory from either ship?
My favorite memory.
Was it Cooper? Sorry, dear. I couldn't help myself.
It probably was, but no. I mean, he was only there for a short few months, but I mean, I was on the ship from the age of 11 to 19. And so that's a lot of time period. I did enjoy going to the different ports, and I didn't get to meet a lot of locals. We pretty much stuck to ourselves, but I enjoyed going to the local ports. At 14 and 15, I'd get into nightclubs by saying I was 18, and no
rebel.
No one carded us because we didn't have driver's license. We were in Europe sailing around, and in the ports, you just to walk into through customs to go to the port to the ship, we would just say Apollo, and we'd walk through, and anyone could have just said Apollo and walked through if they knew the code word. You know, we were so well known. And but going to the different ports, and it expanded my view of the world and the different types of people and the different languages. And I probably learned how to swear in 5 different languages. I couldn't speak any other words, but I definitely knew how to swear, and it saved me a lot of times.
Did you ever swear at LRH?
Oh no. No.
You wouldn't get away with it.
And he never really, he was not a big swearer. Sometimes, you know, when he got really angry, he would swear, and then afterwards he'd apologize for having sworn. But nothing like Miscavige's swearing.
Which trickles down, you know, even at London Org, swearing is,
yes,
you know, is prevalent.
Yeah, it does. It does trickle down. It's like it rolls downhill.
Yeah. Relevant to that, actually, One Love with another great question here. Who has more redeeming factors, LRH or Miscavige?
Redeeming, I would say LRH has more redeeming factors. You know, LRH, having worked with him for so long, yeah, people say he was all in it for the money. And okay, yeah, he did like money, but he wasn't a big spender of it. He lived on a cattle ship in a small stateroom with an auditing room and an office. He didn't have $5,000 shoes. He had a limited size of a closet. He didn't have, you know, all these closets made for his clothing and that type of thing. He was given a lot of gifts, but those all mostly went into storage, because on a ship, what are you going to do with all these different statues and vases and, you know, ornaments and that type of thing? But Hubbard was not, and he didn't go off to the movies, and he worked late, long hours, and he believed in what he was doing. Where Miscavige, I don't think he believes in Scientology. I don't think he does. He believes in running a real estate empire. And if Hubbard knew what he was doing, he would have been in the RPF many times over, or expelled for what he has done to what Hubbard started. And though Miscavige has been in control longer than Hubbard ever was, he has taken it on the wrong track, and it's not what it was to begin with.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about some promo I saw recently of kids on the Freewinds doing this kind of heavy messed work, and the whole point is, you know, your kids can learn independence and, you know, confidence, and send them to the Freewinds to do this course. If anyone is watching this that is a current Scientologist that is thinking of sending their kid to the Freewinds, what message would you have for them?
You know, that's a mixed bag, because I've seen other ships where they've got sails and stuff, and kids go and they do schooling on that ship, and they sail around the world learning how to sail. And I don't see anything wrong with that. That's a great experience. And you got to remember, these kids who are going there are probably all brainwashed already on the subject, and that's their desire to go and do that. Just like so many, you know, kids grow up in Scientology, they want to join the SEAL, they want to be a messenger. You saw that messenger running by, you wanted to be like them. You know, that's the same thing that's going to go on with any Scientology kid that goes to the Freewinds. It's going to be their desire to go and do that.
But unfortunately it's coerced, right? You know, I wanted to join the Sea Org. I wanted to be that messenger, but I didn't know that that was going to be harmful for me. And that's what is important to note, right? Is you think that it's the best thing for the greatest good, for the greatest number of dynamics, but actually it's a harmful thing for children particularly, right?
Well, yeah, I was 11 years old. You didn't know anything else, but I became very self-determined. And I was very brainwashed, and I'm still peeling my onion.
Yeah. And such a good example of like how you can be successful outside of Scientology. This is what I love about your story is you've come out, you started your channel, but separate to all of that is you've got your, you know, your business. You've been very successful as an independent person outside of Scientology, you know, in business and just in life in general. And I think that's just such a good image to send to people who are currently in Scientology, that look, you can have a successful life without being in the group, and you're just such a great example of that.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And you got to be disciplined. But I remember, you know, I set up the mortgage company with a group, you know, and I didn't even know what a mortgage was when I started in the mortgage business. You know, I didn't know people got home loans, but I had no concept of how people got a house or whatever. But I depended on the others. But then there was a point where I was going to go off on my own. I was fed up with some of the people that my husband had hired. And I thought they were a fraud, and I wanted no part of it. And I either had to leave or I was going to divorce my husband. So I ended up leaving, and I set up my own mortgage company. And it was me on my own, and I found a space and I started getting it renovated. I hired some loan officers, and every day going into work, I would tell myself, I can do this. And every day, I can do this. I can do this. Okay, what am I going to do today? And I had to get out of my comfort zone. And that's what made me successful, was doing that push and getting out of that comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you can look back and say, I did it, because you did.
I did.
And here you are.
Yes.
Janice, thank you so much for this. Look, Joanna Bananas is just saying, Janice, I've always found your experience so enlightening. Thank you for telling your stories. And you know, I just want to mirror that and say thank you so much for this. And Mark here is saying, Cooper says, subscribe to her channel, which is absolutely true. If you're watching this, there's a link down below in the description for Janice's and Mark's channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion, right? So please go and subscribe to Janice. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Alex, it was great having you here visiting. You're welcome back anytime. And I love being on your channel. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, everyone watching this needs to go and buy Janice's book. There's a link in the description as well. I can't wait to get my teeth stuck into this. Yeah, this is the first one, and then there's a book 2 afterwards. So go and buy the book down below. But Janice, thank you so much for
You're welcome.
For this. It's been fantastic, and I can't wait to do this again soon. Enjoy swimming with your granddaughter.
Okay, she's right here, ready to go.
All right, Janice, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.